for a master's degree in computer science at our university, Federal Universidade de Santa Catarina, Universidade de Santa Catarina. And before starting, I would like you to warn, before starting the defense itself, I would like to thank the Evaluation Professors Board, Professor Ding from Cincinnati University. Thank you very much, Ding. Professor Ricardo Habi, the second. Ricardo Habi, thank you, Ricardo Habi from Unicamp, Universidade de Campinas, São Paulo. Professor Lúcia Moura from University of Ottawa. Thank you, Lúcia. And Professor Jean Martina from our department for our university. I would like also to thank Professor Daniel Panario for having worked with me in advising Gustavo's thesis, Gustavo's work. Daniel, thank you for everything you know. You have done and contributed to our research group very much. Thank you very much. Any questions regarding this virtual room, please contact Jean Martina, is there. Jean Martina is controlling this web system. If anyone in the audience have any questions or suggestions to Gustavo, please write in chat. Chat is in the second column in this web conference web. As soon as possible, we will comment. You will give a return about your comments. Okay. Gustavo, please. You have up to 30 minutes to do your presentation. After that, the evaluation board professors will make their arguments and questions to Gustavo. Okay. Gustavo, it's your turn. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Is the audio fine for you all? Okay. So I'm going to talk about a little bit on the randomness of rainbow signatures. I'd like to extend my thanks to the committee, to my supervisors, and to everyone who's watching. I hope you have a good time listening to me. So this doesn't work. Okay. So I'm gonna. This is a little outline of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to give a little context on multivariate cryptography. Then I'm going to expand on the rainbow signature scheme. I'm going to give detailed description of it because it's the main point of research. Then the meat part is our contribution. So we proposed a new scheme called Rainbow Weta, and we did its associated cryptanalysis. And then we conclude and give some suggestions for future research. So for the introduction, current cryptography is based on problems from number theory, especially integer factorization and discrete logarithm. Those are efficiently solved by Shor's quantum algorithm. That is, it runs on quantum computers. So current cryptography, especially digital signature schemes, is not resistant to quantum computers. And so there is a discipline of cryptography that aims to solve that with algorithms running on classical computers that are immune to attacks on quantum computers. That discipline is called post-quantum cryptography, and there are several active branches, several mathematical methods to build post-quantum crypto systems, and there are several incidentalization calls, such as the one from NIST, which is the most popular one, but there are other ones too. And our research focuses on the rainbow digital signature scheme, which is based on systems of multivariate equations over finite fields. Before talking about rainbow, we should talk about how it's constructed more generally. So it's based on multivariate equations. So that area, the whole area, is called multivariate cryptography. It is the underlying security problem is based on the difficulty of polynomial system solving, which is known to be NP hard since the 70s, and frequently it's also based on some variant of the isomorphism of polynomials. And that comes from the very elegant and frequently used bipolar construction, which has a central trapdoor that has some structure which allows the construction of the underlying scheme. The bipolar construction is pictured like that in below, we have one construction for both public key encryption and digital signature schemes. So we're going to focus on the digital signature scheme procedure. So we can observe that there's a digest there, which is a vector in FM, and it's going to be scrambled by L1, which is a function with some specific characteristics. Then C, actually this is the invert, the pre-image calculation. So from Y we calculate the pre-image of Y under C, and then we get X, which is of a different size. And then we scramble it again with L2, which is another function. And we get the final signature Z. And then if we want to verify the signature, this is the signature generation process. If you want to verify the signature, we go way back, composing the three functions, and we try to get H again. The numbers M and N have a special relation. When M is less than N, the resulting signature schemes will have very small signatures, very comparative signatures, and very large keys. That will be explained later why. So talking about a rainbow, it was created by Degen Schmidt in 2005 and is currently a finalist of the NIST standardization process. It is on the third round, recently announced as a finalist. It has a very easy description. It has a good balance between signature and key sizes compared to other multivariate schemes. And it is a generalized version of the UOV scheme due to Kipnis et al. Published in 1999, a multi-layer version that is. It is called rainbow because when you mix oil and vinegar, several layers of it, you get the rainbow of colors. Keys of the rainbow signature scheme are systems of equations, pseudo-random systems of equations, so they aren't very compressible, thus they are very big. And they are orders of magnitude larger than conventional keys used in cryptography nowadays. And for example, where it says 3072 bits, but rainbow is roughly 1 megabit, so that's very big. So I'm going to explain rainbow in details. So to instantiate a scheme, we have to choose some parameters, the order Q of finite fields, and some integers, the number of layers U and the number of variables N, and some vinegar parameters V1 to VU, such that one is less than the other and smaller than the other. For each layer, we set the big V set for each vinegar variable, so it's 1 to V all of each parameter, and all variables are the next variables in the sequence, so VL plus 1 till VL plus 1. So it's the vinegar variable V2, for example, is V1 plus union O1, for example. And the size of OL is little OL. So with that arrangement, we can construct vector spaces spanned by quadratic oil-vinegar polynomials. The rainbow uses oil-vinegar polynomials as a way to actually generate the signature. Those oil-vinegar polynomials are specially structured as below. So we have cross vinegar terms, so we have a vinegar and vinegar. Then we have vinegar cross oil, so we can mix those. But we do not have oil cross oil terms, so that allows for the signature generation. And of course, we have vinegar linear terms and constant terms, and all coefficients are in FQ. So the number of equations in the keys is M, N minus V1, and we can randomly pick two invertible affine transformations, L1 and L2, which are basically square invertible matrices in FQ, with the specific size. And the syntron map is a function C, or a polynomial system of M polynomials that map to n variables. So the way we build that is to choose exactly little L polynomials from each vector space for each layer, and then choose the coefficients randomly. So we have, for each vector space, we choose a specific quantity of polynomials. The private key does is the tripole of functions separated, and the public key is the composition of those such that it's hard to invert. And Wolf shows that in the single layer case, that is in the UOV case, L1 is unneeded. It does not contribute to the security. So before talking about signature generation, we have to explain how the preimage of the central map is calculated. So vinegar variables of a layer are exactly the oil and vinegar variables from the previous layer. So as I said, V2 is equal to V1 union O1, for example. And this fact enables the inversion of each oil vinegar layer recursively. So with the usual parameter of layers U equals 2, we have the such initial configuration of C. So we have cross vinegar variables in the first layer, cross vinegar oil variables, which are depicted by a cross, so they are quadratic terms, and we have linear terms here and the constants. We do not have quadratic oil terms, and we do not have any terms which are outside the layer, so O2, O3, for example. In the second layer, we have all the terms that we can have except the quadratic oil variables of that layer. So we have lots of quadratic terms, lots of combinations, and the respective linear and constant terms. To actually generate the preimage, we had to randomly choose the first vinegar variables and substitute them in the system. So we flip some coins and obtain some V1s, and we substitute them on C, and we end up with lots of constant terms here and here. And we have some linear terms here because the V1s are now all constants, and of course the zeros are maintained. In the second layer, it is analogously, but we still have some quadratic terms. Note that in the first layer, now we have O1 variables and O1 equations. So we can solve that system with methods such as Gaussian elimination. And we can thus get the next set of vinegar variables, that is V2, for example. So we solve that, if possible. If it's not possible, we need to choose another set of vinegar variables of V1. And by solving that, we obtain V2, and we substitute V2 on the second layer, and so on and so forth. We will obtain O2 equations and O2 variables, and we will solve again and again for the number of layers until we get the whole preimage. So now that we have talked about the signature and the preimage calculation, we can generate the signature. So consider a cryptographic hash function H, a message M of any size, and compute the digest HM. With possession of the private key, we simply apply the inverse of L1 to H and obtain Y. Then, as I just explained, we obtain the preimage of Y under the central map. We obtain X as per the previous slides. And then we pass X through the inverse of L2 and compute the final signature Z. To verify the signature, it's simple. We obtain H again from the message M. With the public key, we evaluate Z at B and obtain H prime, and we compare both. And if H is equal to H prime, the signature is valid, and otherwise it is invalid. So, having explained the rainbow signature scheme, now it's time to talk about our research, how it evolved. Our original research question was to address the reduction of key sizes in rainbow-like schemes. So we found out the current methods to reduce keys are not usually compatible between themselves. So if you have a method that reduces the private key, it is not usually compatible with one that reduces the public key, and vice versa. That was the case until some very recent papers. And to the best of our knowledge, adding structure to the key space is a very delicate matter. We found out many examples of works that were shortly broken, that shortly after its publication they were broken because of some structure added to the central map, for example, or even to some other part of the system. And then that led us to research the early substitution of vinegars in the private key to allow its reduction. So we tried to analyze how with respect to the system, how that behaves. And then we ended up with some consequences of manipulating the very randomness of signatures. Our first proposal was to simply fix the first vinegar variables, since they can be fixed and early substituted in the central map. We can reduce the private key in a very effective way. And that general framework, which works for all rainbow-like schemes, or at least a big part of them, is denoted rainbow weta. So that can be applied to, for example, methods that reduce private and public keys too. So we did that, and we published that in Africa Crypt, and it was a good trip. But we have to ensure the preimage of C, since that if we are proposing a scheme, we have to ensure that all messages can be properly signed. So it may occur, as I've just said, that the initial choice of V1 leads to unsolvable systems of equations when you're calculating the preimage. So we have to ensure that does not happen at all for some choice of message and vinegar variables. We found out that there's a very, very low probability that that happens for common values of Q, even in normal signature generation processes. But we still have to maintain the ability for the scheme to sign any message at all. So we propose some ways to obtain the original central map after the variables were substituted. We cannot recover it, so we have to. We cannot recover it easily, so we have to use some feats of the scheme to do that. So we propose 3 ways to recover C. One is a C. One is using a pseudo-random number generator to obtain C again, as is known in the literature. One is using the other is using linear relations due to Petzold et al. In 2010. They were published as the basis for the cyclic rainbow signature scheme, which they have discovered that there is a way to relate L1, L2, and P and obtain C. So that is possible, but albeit very costly. Very costly operation. And then there's a third suggestion, which is based on the USMA variant submitted to NIST by Ding et al. In the second round and probably in the third too. That makes use of a salt that can be modified instead of V1. That is, a message is not signed by itself, but it is signed with concatenated with a salt. So the digest is taken from a message, concatenated with some random value, and then it is signed. If the salt is random, so it can be changed instead of the V1 variables, and as such, it will yield another very random looking string from the digest calculation, so we can just change that instead of regenerating C. So that is our main proposal. The effect of the construction, we found out that the preimages with fixed elements, that is, and if we fix V1s, and then the preimages have the first V1 elements all the same, so they have fixed elements. They are efficiently shuffled by L2, so recall that there's another shuffling after the preimage step. So the statistical argument is that the signatures look random enough when compared to conventional rainbow signatures, and we did that through differences of means and standard deviations, comparison of the cumulative distribution function, and quartile plots. So a bunch of statistical arguments. The structure of the scheme, it is unchanged. That is, we do not introduce anything to the central map as other works did, such as sparseness. And as such, we can use conventional parameters, and as does we argue that current algebraic cryptanalysis is ineffective because the secure parameters are maintained. However, we acknowledge that we did not investigate deeply about side channel attacks, and we point out that regenerating C is highly detectable from the point of view of an attacker. So that is something to be paid attention to. And these are some results for key pair reduction. So we have the parameters as published in a very recent work by Ding et al., which he parameterized the second round parameters, some little tweaks. So that's probably going to appear in the third round. And the rainbow proposal has a classic proposal and then a cyclic proposal, so that reduces the private key. So we can see that a whole key pair is reduced by up to 77% for large parameters when applying both cyclic rainbow and our proposal. So that is a very big reduction. And of course, the private side reduction is comparable. However, we researched more deeply about the cryptanalysis of vinegar variables with question to the rainbow signature scheme, and we found out that there is very little amount of work done in that avenue. I found only works related to side channel attacks, so not just works with algebraic attacks, but they are effectively using fault attacks to introduce faults to vinegar variables and then making them be reused or even zeroed out. So there is two parts to the attack, the introduction of faults and the algebraic part. The practical fault attacks are not easily performed, as argued by a very recent work by Mus et al., which broke a variant of the UOV scheme. And as such, we would not need to use fault attacks, because what we do is exactly fix vinegar variables through our proposals. So we do not need to rely on faults. So with that said, we propose an attack that lists an equivalent private key from signatures with the same V1, since there is an algebraic method that can make use of repeated vinegar variables. That attack is closely related to the UV attack that, due to Kipnis et al. In 1999, more as also known as the Kipnis-Shamir attack that broke the balanced oil and vinegar scheme back in 1998. So before talking about the attack, we have to explain a little bit about equivalent keys. It is a remarkable fact of the bipolar construction that there exist equivalent private keys that compose to the same public key. So in the case of Rainbow specifically, the underlying security problem is called the extended isomorphism of polynomials, as published in 2008. And it is shown by Wolf that there are several redundant private keys in the key space of Rainbow. It is a very striking consequence of such equivalent keys. So they basically partitioned the key space into equivalence classes and found out that there are some that represent them more generally. So the practical consequence of that is that security of the underlying scheme is not reduced if simple L1 and L2 are chosen. So there is some structure we can use into those that can reduce the private key a little bit and can prevent equivalent keys. So several algebraic attacks are based on finding equivalent keys from some structure introduced to the scheme. So that is very common in the literature. You introduce some structure to the Rainbow, and we can and some attacker finds a shortcut to find an equivalent private key. That is exactly what happened to us. So now to talk about the UV attack, which is very important to our work, we will present a version of it with a single layer, so just a UV scheme, but it can be applied to the Rainbow scheme too. So a very important definition is the oil subspace, which is basically all vectors which start with the first V or V1, vinegar variables equal to 0. And that set equipped with the usual vector space binary operations is the oil subspace, and its preimage under O under L2 is called O-tiled. So the main point of the attack, they found out that there is a very specific combination of things in the scheme that make that some part of O is preserved. So what does that mean? If we pick, for example, two polynomials in C, and we compose them like that, so we can translate them to functions, and that translation is a very big asterisk. So this translation is actually the composition of maps from unique symmetric matrices out of homogeneous quadratic polynomials. So there is a small body of work that deals with exactly how to construct such functions from polynomials. So if we pick the associated function with fi, with the polynomial fi, and compose with the inverse of the function of fj, they found out that preserves the part of the oil subspace, and that occurs in the private keys. But in the public key, so if we pick two public polynomials, and we do the same composition, one with the inverse of the other, O-tiled is preserved too. So the main point of the attack is to find the common invariant subspace O2. So the attack works like this. We pick several combinations of polynomials, and then we compute the first with the inverse of the other. So we locate its associated O-tilde, and the common invariant, that is the common subspace O-tilde of all such combinations, leads to an equivalent map L2 tilde. And finding that L2 tilde leads to an equivalent private key of the form, and recall that we were talking about UV, so there's just two parts to the private key. So we can just compose L2 tilde with P, which is the public key, and we can just use its inverse as the other part of the key, and of course that composes to P again, so that is an equivalent private key. The complexity of the attack is exponential, but in the case of the balanced oil and vinegar scheme, since V equals to O, this part is cancelled, so it is polynomial. So it is a very effective attack for small differences of V and O. In the case of OR scheme or proposed scheme, we can use that to break rainbow eta. Since UV attack is also applicable to rainbow, it's very common in cryptanalysis of rainbow-like schemes. Rainbow can be interpreted as a large single UV scheme with some extra polynomials in the central map. In our case, if there is a single layer of OR scheme, we can just pick any two signatures produced with rainbow, and then we can obtain its subtraction, and the preimage of under L2 of that subtraction is in O. So that is, we subtract those, we apply L2, and we find out that there's a that equation is a vector with the first V variables equal to 0. So that vector is exactly in the oil subspace. So we pick any m plus 1 signatures. We have to obtain m linearly independent vectors of O tilde. So we just pick m plus 1 and perform m subtractions of a specific form. And the vectors have to be linearly independent, but that's very, very likely to occur. And if we have m linearly independent vectors of O tilde, so we have a basis of the subspace, and we can construct the equivalent L2 tilde, and then we can construct an equivalent private key and forge signatures. So with m plus 1 signatures, we can forge, we can construct an equivalent key. If U is bigger than 1, so there is more layers than 1, we need to solve for the remaining variables. That is, this subtraction, this equation will not yield exactly a vector in O, because there will be some variables here that are not 0, so we have to solve for those. Since we have m signatures, m plus m subtractions, we have to solve for the remaining variables, so that is equivalent to a polynomial system with m quadratic equations and m minus O1 variables. The complexity of solving a polynomial system in finite fields is there isn't any very elegant closed formula, but that is of course much easier than solving or than applying other attacks. Okay. So what we conclude from that is that the elimination of randomness from rainbow signatures is not recommended. We found out that signatures look statistically random, but they still leak information from the private key. And the private key size is, of course, greatly reduced, but at the expense of security levels. So we found out an attack which works in polynomial time if there is a single layer of the scheme and all vinegar variables are fixed. If there are more layers in the scheme, then performing the attacks is easier than all other known methods by a large margin, because it's a very small polynomial system compared to the big picture, like inverting P, for example. However, if V1 is only partially fixed, Shim and Q very recently argued that the resulting scheme is still insecure, so we independently find out the results from them. So there is independent research, and as does there is a part of my thesis which argues that the rainbow eta with less vinegar variables fixed is still secure, so that is going to be corrected very soon. And actually that's not secure at all. And finally, we have some open problems for research. So if we want to solve the matter of reusing vinegar variables, we can store pre-used vinegar variables, previously used vinegar variables to prevent their reuse. However, the private key becomes stateful, that is, it has to be updated with every signature, and of course it becomes larger, so that is a problem for Rainbow. I haven't seen any work on pool random number generation, so that could be exploited in some way, some sort, to actually reuse vinegar variables by manipulating the very random number generation. And of course, there's some countermeasures that can be done against tampering of intermediate signing steps that some works in fault attacks suggested, and I echo here. A signature, if someone introduces a fault in the signature generation process, there could be a checksum alongside the signature, so it can be verified shortly after it's created, so it can be assured that there is no problem with reusing vinegar variables. And of course, the far-fetched idea is that removing the randomness is desirable. So obtaining vinegar variables deterministically from some combination of the private keys message is desired if we could do that. That is a very, very broad suggestion. So that's it. Some references, and thanks for your attention, and I'm open to questions and criticisms.
Okay, Gustavo, thank you for the presentation. Now is time to do the question phase. I would like to invite you to thank again Jintai. Jintai, could you tell something? Could you evaluate the Gustavo's presentation in Thesis, please?
Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you guys for inviting me for the defense. I really appreciate it, and I'm actually really impressed. I think the presentation is very clear. It's a very nice presentation, and I also like the work very much. It is very interesting, I have to say. This observation, you have by fixing V, reduce the private key, and so on. So before I start to ask questions, maybe I will make one or two comments. So Gustavo is completely right. Cryptography looks easy in some way, but you do any change, you have to be very careful. Any leak of information can kill you. Very, very detrimental. So this remark he made is very important. And number two is I want to make a remark is that there's a work, I don't know if Gustavo is realized, there's a work done by Tsuyoshi Takaki. I don't know the time. What they're saying is that the vinegar variable has to be protected, which means if you sign, somehow I know the value of vinegar variable, then you're dead. I don't know if you're aware of this work, Gustavo. Yeah, you should look, I think you can find it. So your work is in line with what he's saying, right? What you're doing here is fix the vinegar variables. It's more or less you start leaking information already, because I know every time you use the same vinegar variables, then somehow information is leaked. So now I'm coming to my question. So the first question I'd ask is that in terms of reduced key size, what are other sorts you have done in terms of besides this? Do you have any other idea suggestions?
We haven't explored any other ideas in reducing key sizes because, as I've just said, I was very scared by the body of literature that tries to reduce key sizes and fails with some sort of attack. So introducing structures, sports matrices, circulant matrices, and all of that. So we explored that, and then we shortly found out that that didn't work. So I did not have any other suggestions for reducing private key size, other than finding some very specific and small structure that perhaps will not affect the security, such as the equivalent key thing, which we can reduce L1 and L2, and that amounts to like 5% or 1% or yeah, very.
We're using that already now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even my table already has that, and of course using homogeneous quadratic polynomials, since linear and constant terms do not contribute to the security. That is another short reduction, but I did not try to do another proposal on that because I did one and it was broke, so I could not try again.
It's a very good point. I like the idea. Then here, maybe I will make one remark, which is, in the way we reduce the key, I mean, I think you understand it, but I just want to remark to everybody here. We actually found out that part of the key you can, how do I say this? So normally we generate private key and then produce the public key. What we found out is actually you can first fix part of the public key, any value you want, we don't care. And then you can calculate your private key. So by doing that, we reduce the key size, which means the part you can be anything you want. You can just first use a random number generator to generate it. So therefore, this key reduction we are doing now does not affect security at all. They are the same scheme, except we realize in the key generation process, certain things are reversible, which means you can fix public key and then generate a private key. So that's how it's done, and therefore the security is not affected. Okay, this is the first. And I have a second question. You mentioned quite a bit about side channel attack and fault attack. I think I'm not concerned too much about the fault attack, because in my understanding, any schemes can be broken by fault attack. Doesn't matter what. So now my question for you is: so what are your thoughts on side channel attack? Where are the possible weaknesses in terms of side channel attack against Rainbow?
From what I found out, I've read, I think 4 works on the matter. I mean, there's a very little body of work in fault attacks with regards to Rainbow. Outside of that, I've read very few works too, but it's not my specialty. That's why I didn't focus my literature review on that. But my personal assessment is that Rainbow is secure against side channel attacks, against, of course, timing and energy side channel attacks, because it's simply the simple implementation is we can do the mathematical arithmetic and all that stuff in constant time, and Gaussian elimination in constant time. So from what I've read from your submission to Rainbow to NIST, so your implementation is constant time. So I do not think it can be attacked easily through normal, that is, differential power analysis and all of that means. Of course, fault attacks, as the guys and the literature says, they can be used in any sort of constant time implementation, because it's outside of the scope of manipulating the implementation, but the system. But with regards to other classical side channel attacks, I think Rainbow is relatively secure, I would say.
Okay.
Just because the amount of the work done has amounted to, Rainbow is still secure. And there is very little work on that, but there also could always be more.
Yeah. Well, we actually tried, but we couldn't do anything. So therefore, it's very strange in the sense in cryptography, if you try to do cryptanalysis, if you failed, you cannot publish paper. That's the problem. You can only publish when you succeeded in breaking it. So if you didn't succeed, so we have tried pretty hard, but we didn't find anything. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just if anyone is interested, I think there is one comprehensive study of that is in the Transactions of Chess by, I do not remember the authors, but it came very recently, so there is kind of a big work on that. And I also wanted to comment that I just remembered that another solution to reducing the private key is to use good keys, which are the generalization of equivalent keys, but that's not very much studied at all. In my understanding, there is very little body of work in that, but it's a generalization, so it probably would allow for more reductions, but it's still a small reduction. So I forgot to add that comment before.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Gustavo, I think I'm done with my question and comment. Thank you.
You're muted.
Okay, I was talking without my mic on. Okay, now is Ricardo Habi. Thank you for participating in this defense. Ricardo, would you like to talk, please?
Thank you, Gustavo, for inviting me to be part of this committee. I thank you, Gustavo, for a very nice presentation, very nice summary of your work. I liked the presentation as well. I also liked reading your work. I unfortunately didn't have much time to dive really into the details, and I'm not a specialist in MQV signature systems, so I'm a little bit more appreciating your work and the general lines of it, and evaluating how, according to our standards, you deserve to be called a master's in computer science, and in that regard, I'm pretty sure you're qualified, and from the quality of the work, in spite of in terms of cryptography, not getting at what what would be super desirable, that is to have some increase in efficiency that was proven secure, totally secure. But I consider that the ideas you put forward, all the contributions you've made, I mean, from reading your text alone, one can learn different things that could help in, first of all, understanding, but also perhaps pursue some different lines of research that could take one to an approach that would be considered secure. I know that from general lines that this is a pretty hard system to get. You have to get a good secure to reduce the security, reduce the key sizes without much problem. That is, it's very sensitive system to work with. So I appreciate your courage and your initiative in diving into this and making a lot of contributions that are not directly related to. They're not directly they cannot be called a secure system, but nevertheless, they're very meaningful contribution. That's what I'd like to stress. So in my opinion, the text is impeccable. I mean, the reading of it, I only found, a couple of typos here and there, and I don't remember, I didn't even mark them because they're so minor that I just kept on reading it, and I say, well, let me read this and not stop. But it's very nice text with, very maturely written, and I find that too. So I find it very nice to find a master's thesis in these days. Here, I've been to several committees recently, and not so recently, but it's hard to see a text that has been so carefully treated and carefully written, and with depth too. I mean, it's not that it's only impeccable, but it has depth too. So for a master's thesis, so congratulations. I don't have, as I said, I'm not a specialist. I can see many things that I could ask, but for other approaches for increasing efficiency, do you have any other ideas? I mean, aside from reducing, I understand that it's mostly focused on reducing key sizes, but are there other things that one can do with rainbow signatures or a similar system?
We briefly pursued something related to increasing the efficiency of solving the Gaussian elimination, so trying to find something to do with them and trying to solve them more easily. But the parameters are so small with regards to the Gaussian big picture that are systems of 100 times 100. So very small, they are negligible costs, so we didn't find anything related to that. We tried to measure the cost, but it's very fast. Of course, the constant time implementations can be improved always, but I'm not much more of an implementer, as I'm just a theoretical researcher. So we didn't go too forward on that. We also try to figure out if there are any relations between the parameters that allow for the more efficient signing and key generation and all of that. But that has been covered already by Petzold. They have done extensive work in their PhD thesis, so how to manipulate the parameters and optimize them to reduce layers and increase the efficiency. One thing that is not approached very much in the literature is the use of more layers and less equations and variables in each layer. That was the case in earlier works. I mean, I think Professor Deng's original work presents 5 layers in Rainbow, where the usual is 2. So, but I don't think there is much to be explored there. I've seen some works that break. That do not recommend that for more layers, and also using more than quadratic equations, that is cubic equations. I've seen work doing with that too, but insecure work. So I think we're at a point that only implementations can be, at least most of the efficiency can be done through implementations, but not through the scheme itself, because it's, as I said, it's very, very simple, and it's already reduced to the layer size, to the equation size, and so at least that's my opinion.
I mean, what would be a non-constant time, or an implementation that would be that would suffer from, say, a timing attack or something, a non-constant time implementation of such schemes? I mean, I don't see a way of doing it. Not that I don't see, but perhaps there is a way of exploiting the say non-constant time implementations to make it faster or more efficient or whatever. Is there a way of doing it?
As I said, I do not delve too deep.
Right.
Yeah, I do not delve too deep into implementations, as I've seen those that are available, and they are very few. I think there's just only one, to be honest, and from Rainbow's official submission, they are constant time, and there's only so many ways you can implement Rainbow efficiently and with so much simplicity on the field operations and all of that. So it's probably not worth it, as I said, because of the sizes and the number of variables, etc., etc. I think perhaps the work is more better focused on attacks that can be done, like fault attacks, or manipulate the system itself and something like that. But I think Rainbow is very sufficiently adequate for timing and other such attacks.
Okay, well, thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Custodio, again. That's translations, and to your co-supervisor, too, Danielle. Thank you very much. That's it for me now, for now.
Okay, thank you, Dahabi, for your concerns. Next will be Lucia, no? Lucia Moura, thank you for participating. Your turn, please.
Let me unmute. Okay, thank you, Gustavo. It was very nice to read your thesis. I think it's like Ricardo said, we feel that maturity in your writing, and which is, I think, very rare at the master's level. The thesis is very well written, organized, and seeing your presentation, I learned a lot more. It was much easier to dive into what is going on, especially for me, that I think from all the people here, I am the most removed from the area, the person farther away from the technicality. So, your presentation helped a lot to understand, put more in context what has been done. So I have a few questions. I mean, there is something I would like to contribute, which would be to, just indicate some things for the final text, something that would be nice to see in the final text. The first one is very funny, that is page numbers. So there was no page numbers in the So it was a bit difficult when I want to see index. Okay, I'm working with a PDF, so it helped, but I think you should add page numbers. And the index refer to page numbers, so we should put page numbers in the pages. Another thing that I found is like this. I mean, we can feel that you read the material, you understood, and you wrote with your own words. So in the sense, and then you have a very refined English, incredibly. I mean, I wish you'd be my editor. So that's very nice. You see that, you know, it's not that you are picking from different places and the text is smooth. So I like that. You own the work and explain, and there's creativity in the way you write and you put things in perspective. So very good work. In mathematical terms, sometimes, then there is points in which creativity is not a good idea. Like, you know, a definition is done in a certain order because, you know, sometimes you change the order of the quantifier and it means something different. So I marked a few points like this, and this is mostly on the background section. That's probably the last thing you have to write before submitting. Is more the background, the definitions, and things like this. And then there is some that you pick if you see, for example, I don't want to bother you with these little details, but I have written there. But your definition, if you pick strictly your definition of irreducible polynomial, because of the order of the quantifiers, and then if this implies that, then this, any polynomial will be irreducible. And it's just a small reordering, okay, of your quantifiers. So there are some instances like this that I marked, okay. And so I don't think it's worth going through them. There aren't a lot, but maybe there is 4 points like this. You know, the for or should be after, otherwise you're saying something different and things like this, right? So there is some points like this. I would say another one that I think should be very precise is the definition of LCMA, page 51. 51 of the PDF, because this is things, you know, your thesis so well written, people will refer to, other people will quote, other students might be based on themselves. So, for example, when you say the adversary succeeds if it produces a valid pair of messages and signature, not in a previous query, and when you say not in a previous query, it looks like it's the pair. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, the original definition is the message didn't appear before. I think there is some subtle differences and like an ambiguity, right? When you say not in the previous query, what are the two things there? Correct? Am I wrong here?
Well, to be quite honest, I kind of took that from Dan Bona's paper, so I do not recall the details, but well, I know I left that from someone who knows way more about USMA than I do. I did not try to explain it with my words, they did it themselves, so, well, we can see that later, but probably okay. You're right, so I try to be creative sometimes.
Sometimes it's just a comma or, you know, the order in which you put the parameters, then what you're saying, which happens that, it's referring to the different map. I don't know. I pointed here for further checks. Okay. Okay, so I guess these are some points of, you know, text refinement. I have some other 2 questions. One is more on the basis of this whole area here. It's just some phrasing, page 20. So let me go here, PDF, page 20. So that's something I'm still a bit puzzled about this, you know, the relationships of traditional computers and quantum computers and things like this. What is known, what you can say it's possible to be done, what not, how it's this kind of arguments, right? So I just want to understand this first phrase on 1.1. So when you say, and it's really because I do not know exactly what is known regarding difficulty of problems between quantum and classical computers, right? It is known that the difficulty of solving polynomial systems over multiple variables does not change in the quantum setting. And my question is, it is known means we don't know of any change. It's not known that any possible change that might happen. We haven't found out yet, or that is a proof of impossibility.
I'm referring to the NP hardness of the problem. That's all.
Okay, so a similar NP hardness. So how does NP hardness work in the quantum world?
Well, that's outside the scope of my research, but I think NP hardness is hard in the quantum setting because the problem itself is hard and you can do nothing to speed up because there's no algorithm to do that. But it's been some time I took theory of computation. I may be wrong on the details.
Okay. Okay.
But I can look that up if you want to specifically discern the effect of NP hardness in the quantum setting. If that works for you.
Sure. Yes, and just verify if you know the argument has to be weakened or explained a little better. Okay, that's good. The argument on the statement, huh? Okay, good. And then I have a question more now in the future works that I was curious. His conclusions, right? Yeah, so there was, let's say, future work. I don't remember exactly. I marked a certain paragraph here, but I'm you can explain what's the problem that it comes from. You mentioned something like this, the second to last paragraph. We assume that the number of signatures needed to attack our proposal can be improved. Our attack is based on combining pairs of signatures in order to obtain linearly independent vectors, right? Our strategy to pick such combinations is naive at the moment. However, carefully picked combinations of a smaller collection of signatures may result in the desired number of vectors used to proceed with our attack. Okay, so you wanna, I don't know, try other combinations. Can you explain this idea? I'm curious about what you have tried.
I figured you'd notice that. So that is already in the final work. It is some of the things we improved that after I handed the thesis to the committee. So if you recall the attack, so we need to perform m subtractions. So we have to pick at least m+1 signatures. So I was thinking, and I didn't find anything specifically on the works related to Rainbow about how to effectively keep a lower bound of that value. That is m+1 the really lowest number we can do for such subtractions? Because the subtractions have to be linearly independent. But I don't know, is there some combination of signatures such that, I mean, with 4 signatures, can you do 8 subtractions which are linearly independent? Yes or no? That is the question. So we actually proved that there is a lower bound, and it is m+1. So we cannot construct m signatures, m subtractions with less than m+1 signatures. So if we want to do the attack, we have to pick at least m+1 signatures. Because there is a graph argument, we constructed the graph and we mapped the linearly independent feature to creating an edge between 2 signatures, which are the nodes, and then we proved that there is a tree. And if you add 1 extra edge, it's a cycle, and that cycle between 3 or more signatures makes that they are linearly dependent of each other, the subtractions themselves, I mean. So that is done already. That little future work is a one-page proof, and we did that through a graph argument. However, there is some small future work on that because we didn't prove it for all trees. We did for, let's say, pick one vector and let's say the first signature, sigma 1, and then you do sigma 2, sigma 3, sigma 4, so like a star graph, and those are the subtractions. So sigma 1 minus sigma 2, sigma 1 minus sigma 3, etc. So that is some kind of tree you can construct with that. Another kind of tree is is a simple straight line. So 1 minus 2, 2 minus 3, 3 minus 4, etc. without closing the loop. Those are also linearly independent. But we did not prove for all possible trees that such constructions happen. So if we were to pick a banana tree, that is an actual graph. We do not know if that those subtractions actually work because, I mean, we do not know. We just proved it for some specific trees, some specific graphs, I mean. So there is some future work on top of that. But more or less, that is the idea of mapping the subtractions to a graph and then proving that the combinations are really all that's needed, the n+1 signatures. I can explain later more clearly if you want, or it's going to be on the final text.
Okay, so what you're saying is that since you handed in this 1 month ago to us, you already partially answered the question. Yes. And this has to do with, like, would be you can state the problem purely as I have a bunch of linearly independent vectors and I do subtractions. What's the minimum number? Okay.
Yeah. Oh. We mapped that vector problem, vector subtraction problem to a graph, and then we proved that. I forgot. Oh yeah, and that has implications on the number of the signatures. I mean, there's a whole section on the practicality of the attack. So on discerning signatures from rainbow eta from conventional signatures. So if we needed less signatures, so the attack would be much more practical. So we need to collect, I don't know, 30 signatures instead of 60 or multivariate hypergeometric distribution. That makes a whole bunch of difference. I mean, the probability is much bigger, but that is not the case. So n+1 is the best we can do.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm done with this round.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you very much. Now is Jean Martina. No? Jean is my colleague. Jean, your turn, please.
Okay, guys. I'd like to start thanking Custódio and Daniel and Gustavo for inviting me. I've been working and watching over what Gustavo's work during the whole process, and I've been on all the committees on a more internal role from the program, but I was very pleased to see the final work and what came out. Oops, sorry. And my comments are more general. Okay, I've been looking over his work in the last week or so because it took me time. It's a bit off what I work on a daily basis. So I went over some of the things, and I agree with some of the things that Lucia said, especially regarding a good level of English that is on the text, and also regarding the inversion of some of the mathematical terms that makes sometimes things a bit confusing, that you read it and have some difficulty to understand. Regarding text itself, I think Gustavo is proficient enough to have different styles of writing within the text. Okay, so one of the things that bothered me a bit when reading was that he was using a style that's not very common on scientific text, using inversion of arguments and these sort of things. It is nice if you're reading on classics, okay? But when you're reading something in cryptography, or you're reading computer science, you expect a more descriptional view. And then because it ends up distracting the reader, okay? So it's not that you should not do, but sometimes I felt myself distracted because I was reading a phrase where the argument was inverted, and then I had difficulty to come back to what's going on, and I was paying attention on the style of writing and not on the content. That said, I think one thing that I can add here to the discussion on what Lucia brought in terms of complexity is that maybe there was some space to discussing that new class of complexity called BQP, okay, that maybe would fit some of these descriptions within there. I'm not someone that works in computer theory, but I know that there are things that are quantum specific and that are covered on that specific class. And then I would not go into the details. As Dahab said, it was pleasant to read the text, but to verify properly all the details, it's very, very hard because it's off what I work. But generally speaking, the text is good and involving. Okay, while you're reading, you get involved with the dissertation, and Gustavo writes on a very systematic way, so it keeps reinforcing the reading. But I found some things that bother me while I was reading, especially because, of course, the work was done in a different way than it's written. But when you start reading, you go to the abstract and you read. Okay, I did something, and then it seemed that it was really nice, but then I broke it. And this is, to be honest, this is the sort of things that makes me believe in science, okay? Because everybody wants to have a work that when you reach to the end, it's better than something. And Gustavo just showed scientific reasoning, demonstrating things that should warn people. Like I think that the message at the end is don't mess with private keys, with unbalanced oil vinegar schemes, because everybody that tried that had problems, including me. That's the final message of the text. But then I come with a question. While you're doing the literature review and you've seen that everybody that tried to do something had problems, didn't you have some gut feeling that you would end up in the same sort of trouble that everybody else? Because that's one thing that while I was reading made me think that, okay, I reached the end and you basically got the same problems that everybody else. So what can you say about that, Gustavo?
That I learned to be very modest and to try not to fall into the same things that I discovered. I mean, of course, I tried to do a thing a little bit different from the no. I mean, I didn't try to introduce any kind of special matrix into the private key, and then I tried to do a little side shortcut. But well, it comes to everybody, doesn't it? So I learned to not to believe in my literature review and not try to reinvent the wheel or fail in reinventing the wheel again. So I think that's all I can say about that.
So am I right that the message is that don't mess with trying to shortening private keys on rainbow signatures? That
is the message, and of course the randomness of rainbow signatures should not be messed with. But as a broad stroke of that consequence, I mean, structures even outside post-quantum cryptography is very hard to to give a reason why they exist. I mean, because there have been so many works that break anything structure related. I think in code-based theory that is also relatively common. So in multivariate cryptography too. And I mean, those are the broad stroke messages that I try to paint with my work.
Okay, sorry, I cannot stop myself from inserting myself. So
Please, please, Vincent.
Yeah, I just read a book called The Book of Eels. Have anyone heard of it? The Book of Eels. Have anyone heard about that book?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know eels, right? The fish.
Yeah, yeah.
So eel has a very interesting phenomena, which when you catch an eel, it doesn't have sex organs. So Aristotle asked a question already: how does the eel reproduce? We didn't know. Many people tried. Many scientists tried until 1923. From Aristotle until 1923, this guy, his name is Johannes Schmidt. He spent 20 years find out what's going on. So I like Jan's point. Very, very interesting point. So in science, if everybody failed, if you succeed, that is really the great work. So, but of course, there's always a risk involved. So I think this is always to be or not to be. So this is I think, so this is you made a very good point. So we make choice, that's all. You know what I mean? If everybody fail, you succeed, and that will be incredible work. Do you agree? If it works so easy to do, then you don't appreciate much. But on the other hand, of course, you make a decision. So this guy, really, I suggest everybody read the book. It's a very entertaining book. It's called The Book of Eels. Extremely interesting book. And this crazy Danish guy, Johannes Schmidt, Johannes Schmidt, 20 years looking for the baby eels, where they're produced, and a story like that. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just stopping.
All right. No, I like the intervention, Jinkai, because when I was reading, as I said, it has some philosophical beauty of Gustavo's work. Okay, because this idea of getting studying the whole structure, proposing something, and being able to break it using. He started with different terms and he broke it with different terms. Okay, so there is a contribution in there. There is an advance of science. So I think there is a philosophical beauty on the work. Nevertheless, we didn't find how the eels here, how they reproduce, but we know at least one more way how it does not happen. Okay, so that's important, because probably from Aristotle to this Danish guy, loads of people invented theories on how they reproduce it, and they proved them wrong. Okay, so and that was the basis for the guy actually finding out what's going on. So there is braveness on that, and that's what I should congratulate Gustavo, Custodio, and Daniel on taking up this work, because by getting the literature review, you see that there is a very likely possibility of failing, because everybody fails. But still, if you hit something in there, it's a very big contribution. So that said, okay, I think that the question that we should be answering here is whether it deserves a master's degree, and I think, as I said, due to the philosophical beauty of the work, I think yes. Okay, but then we will have our committee discussion later, and that's all for me. I just wanted to bring this view. And then I'll give the word back to Custodio, and thank you all again for the nice entertainment today.
Thank you, Jean. The only thing that I can say to you about Gustavo is, don't touch the tiger with a short stick. I already learned about that. Okay. Next, I would like to pass the word to Daniel. Daniel Panari would like to tell something, please.
Hi. I was not planning on talking much or anything or making any questions. Um, Maybe just one thing that may have not been clear on the answers of Gustavo is that the thing that when you have n plus one signatures and you have m differences, so you get the vectors and you get the linear independence, these are n plus one signatures using the same variable substitution. So it's not just n plus one signature. You have to use the same fixing, values on the variables, on the vinegar variables. So just because may have not been clear that this has a certain complication there, right? That's just some small clarification. No, overall, no, I have not much other than thanking the committee for reading the thesis, for taking the time and all the comments and suggestions. There are some corrections that, Custodio, me, and Gustavo will take care on this. Please send all your comments, especially Lucia said that has some comments, and Jean too. Maybe send those lines or whatever in an email or just a PDF file with corrections. Same thing for Jintai and Ricardo. If you have some whatever, please send it along. We will incorporate it. There are changes because of the last months. The things on the graph and the trees that now we have some trees. Not all the trees for the graph proof that you need n plus one signatures. So those things will change, but other than that, we will really like to incorporate your improvements and corrections. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, I agree with pretty much everyone said. I think I come from a more mathematical side than computational. So to me, if there is something to be tested and studied, it doesn't need to lead into the final grail, the holy grail. It doesn't. If it does, it's absolutely great, of course. No one says no. But you want to prove that some idea is wrong, and then or not wrong, but doesn't really lead you to the holy grail. It shows that doesn't work. I think it's important to do that. Even though, of course, maybe not so important in mathematics is like this. You don't need to solve Fermat-La theorem, but if you give some thing that could be used in that direction, that's absolutely good. Even if it's eliminating some ideas that don't work. But it does take courage to try things that it will be tough, and that's good. I mean, and it's a master thesis. Is a huge learning experience and progress for Gustavo, right? Because he learned a lot of things in the process. So that's what you want to master students, at least. I like to see that in master students. So yeah, so those are my comments. Thank you very much for your contributions to Gustavo's thesis. Ricardo?
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone. Now it's time to meet the meeting board. Maybe we can. I think we can change the.
Custodio,
room,
I can make a room,
another room
and move the committee to a separate room, and then we get back in here later. Just let me.
Send an email to us.
No, it's over here. I'll create a new room. I'll split this, okay, and I will send everybody to the other room, okay.
Okay.
So
can we send? Sorry, and just the students. I mean, we have to send some documents to them for them to sign, right? So just there's another bureaucracy thing we need to do.
Yeah. I'm doing this right now. I'm just selecting the committee here, and then we'll move to another room. So let me see if I pick everybody in here. Oh, Jintai.
Is it possible to do this in this environment here?
I done it once. Let's see if it will work. Okay, so I'm moving everybody to let me see, me, Daniel, Ricardo, Lucia, Dahab, and Jintai, to another room, and then everybody else will be left on limbo. I believe. Okay. I don't know.
Do that.
So let me try here.
And after teach me how to do that.
Oh, breakout room.
Yes.
join? Only us, right?
Pessoal, eu botei a lista no chat, teve algumas pessoas que já saíram e tal, obrigado pela presença, mas se vocês quiserem assinar pela Assina UFSC, tá ali, e se vocês quiserem passar para as pessoas que ficaram offline, etc., eu não tenho como saber aqui, então tá ali a lista e é isso aí, obrigado novamente.
Hello, guys. Seems like that we were able to jump back.
Yes.
You just re-enable your audio and camera. Okay, so it ended up working.
Yep, we are here. Magic.
We have no audio from Custodio.
Okay, I was talking that there was an option that was called logout. If you should log out, you could turn back here this room without again to proceed the login. I think. Well,
We were beamed safely back.
Yes. That's very good. Very good. Very good feature.
Perfect. Okay, Gustavo, let me see what was said from the board. We have, let me see here. One moment. Okay, we have a report to do. It's a pleasure to say that your defense, your thesis was approved by the board, okay? This is the 1,168th defense master thesis of our program, more than 1,000 master theses till now. Then I would like to read the report, the official report, like the public defense of Gustavo Zambonin's master dissertation was held on September 18th, 2020. On this date, the defense was done by video conference at 10:30 to 11:30. And me and the examination board declared the defense session that the thesis was approved. Congratulations, Gustavo Zambonin.
Thank you all. It was a very humbling experience. Thanks again.
Congratulations, yeah. Gustavo,
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
And Gustavo, you have 2 weeks to do some minor corrections, then submit your thesis to the board, to the program, okay?
And we will check it, right? Ricardo and me will be checking those changes. So you need to send the version to us.
Perfect. Then let's take a picture.
Oh, I will take a picture. I will screenshot.
Yeah, screenshot would be nice.
Screenshot, just a second.
Yeah.
Smile, cheese. I'm screenshotting, cheese. Okay, so everyone does like this. So approved.
Good.
I mean, just a second, not yet. I'm gonna do another screenshot, and I have to do that at the same time. I do this.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gitai. Thank you, Lucia, Dahabi, Daniel, Jan. Okay. Thank you for everything.
See you guys.
Stay well.
Thank
you.
Yeah, well, okay, take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Shintai. Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Dahab. Yeah, thank you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I will stop